Master Shinzo crouched low in the undergrowth, his breath steady, almost imperceptible in the stillness of the forest. Above him, the alien ships blotted out the stars, their massive hulls humming faintly as they hovered over Earth. The Galactic generals, sitting comfortably aboard their command vessels, were confident. Their advanced technology, they believed, rendered Earth defenseless. To them, the planet was nothing more than an anthill, easily crushed. But Shinzo knew better. He signaled to his team, a subtle flick of the wrist, and the shadows moved. Hiro, the youngest of the group, shifted beside him, eyes bright with anticipation. Aiko, her face a mask of calm, barely stirred as she kept her gaze fixed on the enemy, her mind already calculating their next move. These were not ordinary warriors. They were the last of Japan's ninja clans, sworn to defend Earth, no matter the odds. As the alien fleet descended, Shinzo's mind replayed the conversation with Earth's leaders. "We've tried everything," they had said, their faces pale with defeat. "Our weapons are useless. Our technology, no match for theirs. If you cannot help us, Master Shinzo, all is lost." He had accepted the mission without hesitation. For centuries, his clan had been the unseen guardians of Japan, their techniques honed through generations of practice. But this was something far beyond what they had ever faced. Yet, as he had watched the panic in the eyes of Earth's generals, Shinzo felt no fear. Only resolve. The aliens relied on their technology, their sensors and scanners, to detect threats. But the ninjas were more than just men, they were ghosts, able to blend with the environment, to disappear into the very air itself. The enemy wouldn't see them coming. Now, hidden in the dark embrace of the forest, Shinzo could hear the distant clank of alien machines touching down. They moved with an arrogance that grated on him, their massive limbs slicing through trees as they established their forward base. He watched as they spread out in formation, oblivious to the human eyes studying them. "Their sensors sweep in waves," Aiko whispered, her voice as soft as the wind. "Every 15 seconds they reset." Shinzo nodded. Timing was everything. "Hiro," he murmured, "you'll take the right flank. Aiko with me." Hiro's heart raced, but his hands remained steady as he gripped the hilt of his blade. He had trained his whole life for this moment, yet it was hard to shake the surreal feeling of standing against beings from another world. The towering machines, all gleaming metal and cold, unfeeling design, seemed invincible. But Shinzo's voice grounded him. "Remember," Shinzo said, his tone firm, "they are blind to what they cannot understand." Hiro darted off into the shadows, becoming one with the landscape. Aiko and Shinzo moved together, silent as the breeze that rustled the leaves above. The alien machines continued their mindless march, scanning for threats that weren't there. The first target was a scout drone, hovering just above the tree line. Aiko, with fluid precision, leaped onto a low branch, positioning herself directly beneath it. In one smooth motion, she launched a kunai into the drone's underbelly, piercing its core. The machine flickered, sputtered, and fell to the ground in a heap of silent sparks. "One down," she whispered. Shinzo pressed forward, his senses heightened. They had minutes, maybe less, before the aliens realized something was wrong. But they wouldn't panic, not yet. They still believed in their superiority, and that would be their undoing. Up ahead, the alien commander stood in the center of the clearing, surrounded by his armored guard. His elongated limbs twitched as he barked orders in a guttural language, his voice distorted through layers of translation software. This was their leader, the key to crippling the invasion. Shinzo signaled to Aiko, who nodded and vanished into the trees. She would circle around to flank the guards, taking them out one by one while Shinzo moved in for the kill. He crouched low, inching closer to the clearing. The sounds of the forest, the chirp of insects, the rustle of leaves, were the only noises that accompanied him. To any observer, it would seem as though the ninja had disappeared altogether. Then, in a single fluid motion, he struck. The first guard never saw him. One moment, the alien stood tall, scanning the horizon. The next, a shadow flickered across his vision, and his world went black. The second guard turned, too slow, his armor clanging as a blade found its mark between the plates. One by one, the guards fell, their alien blood soaking into the forest floor. The commander turned just in time to see Shinzo, blade raised, his eyes cold and unreadable. "For Earth," Shinzo whispered, before striking the final blow. The alien commander crumpled to the ground, his voice silenced forever. But Shinzo knew their work wasn't done. In the distance, alarms blared as the aliens realized something had gone horribly wrong. The element of surprise was gone. Shinzo stood over the fallen commander, wiping his blade clean. Aiko appeared beside him, her expression unreadable. "They know," she said simply. Shinzo sheathed his sword, his mind already racing to the next move. "Then we disappear," he replied. "Let them chase shadows." As they melted back into the forest, the hum of alien machines grew louder, but the ninjas were already gone. Their work had only just begun. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Earth had struck back. And the Galactic generals, once so confident, would soon learn the true power of those they had dismissed as primitive. The forest was silent again, but the tension had thickened like a fog. Master Shinzo and Aiko moved swiftly through the undergrowth, their movements barely a whisper as they put distance between themselves and the alien outpost. The initial strike had gone exactly as planned. The alien commander lay dead, and the guards were none the wiser until it was too late. But now the real challenge began. "They'll tighten their defenses," Aiko murmured as she leaped over a fallen tree, her voice soft but laced with certainty. "They won't make the same mistake twice." Shinzo nodded, his eyes scanning the dense forest ahead. "No," he agreed, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "But mistakes aren't the only path to victory. We adapt as they do." From the treetops, a soft signal echoed, "Heroes." He was close, and by the sound of it, undetected. The youngest of their group, Hiro had proven his worth by disabling one of the alien weapons before their retreat, using his agility and cunning to slip through their grasp. But this mission was far from over. The aliens, now aware that something was amiss, would soon flood the area with troops, hunting for the invisible threat that had struck from the shadows. Shinzo and Aiko reached a clearing where Hiro waited, crouched behind a boulder, his eyes bright with excitement but tempered by caution. "I took out 2 more drones," he whispered, keeping his voice low. "But they've increased patrols. They're sweeping every quarter of the forest." "Good," Shinzo replied, his tone steady. "Let them search. They're wasting time." Aiko joined them, her gaze sharp as she studied the horizon. "We need to move. The longer we stay here, the more likely they are to close in." Shinzo considered her words. The clearing was too exposed. They couldn't risk staying out in the open. But they still had one last objective to complete: sabotaging the alien power source fueling their operations. Without it, their advanced weapons and scanners would be rendered useless. It was their best shot at crippling the invasion. "How long until the next sensor sweep?" Shinzo asked. Hiro glanced at his wrist, where a small device blinked in rhythm with the alien scanning waves. 30 seconds. Shinzo's eyes flickered toward Aiko, and she gave a single nod. The plan was already forming in her mind. "We'll head east, toward their main power grid. It's heavily guarded, but their security patterns are predictable." Shinzo motioned for them to move, his figure disappearing into the shadows of the trees. They moved as one, a silent trio gliding through the night, invisible to the alien eyes that scoured the forest. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated. They knew that one mistake would mean death. The landscape shifted as they approached the alien camp. The towering trees gave way to a metallic expanse, where the alien power grid hummed with energy. Towering pylons crackled with electricity, each one pulsing with a strange, otherworldly glow. Guards were posted at every entrance, their movements mechanical as they patrolled the perimeter. Aiko crouched beside Shinzo, her sharp eyes tracking the guards' patterns. "They rotate in pairs. 15-second intervals." "How many guards?" Hiro whispered, his hand already gripping his blade. 6 visible. More inside, undoubtedly, Shinzo answered. We'll need to move fast. Aiko's mind was already at work. I can take out the two near the northern pylon. Hiro, you'll handle the ones patrolling the east. That leaves the central unit unguarded. We take it down, and their power grid collapses. Shinzo's eyes narrowed in approval. The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. Move now, he ordered, his voice low but firm. No hesitation. Without a sound, Aiko melted into the night, her silhouette vanishing as she approached her targets. Hiro followed suit, darting toward the eastern side of the grid with the precision of a predator. Shinzo waited, counting the seconds as the patrols moved in their predictable patterns. Then, with deadly efficiency, Aiko struck. Her blades gleamed for a split second before two guards crumpled to the ground, their throats slit in perfect silence. Hiro was equally swift, dispatching his targets with practiced ease, leaving no trace of his presence. Shinzo advanced toward the central unit, his movements deliberate. He could feel the pulse of the alien energy beneath his feet, the hum of the power grid vibrating in the air around him. Reaching the control panel, he quickly assessed its design. Alien symbols flashed across the interface. But it was the pattern that mattered. He could see where the power converged, where a single disruption would bring the entire system crashing down. He placed the explosive charge carefully, his fingers moving with the precision of a master craftsman. 10 seconds, he muttered into the small comm link at his wrist. Aiko and Hiro returned to his side just as the charge began its countdown. The alien camp remained oblivious to the impending catastrophe. They moved quickly, retreating into the forest just as the charge detonated with a low, thunderous boom. The power grid flickered, and then, with a final sputter, collapsed. The once bright lights of the alien camp blinked out, casting the area into darkness. Confusion rippled through the alien forces, their sensors now blind, their communication lines severed. The ninjas had struck again, leaving chaos in their wake. We need to keep moving, Aiko whispered, though the tension in her voice had eased slightly. They'll regroup soon. Shinzo nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant alien ships that hovered like silent sentinels above. They'll adapt, he murmured, but so will we. As they disappeared once more into the shadows of the forest, the tension remained thick, but now there was a flicker of something more. Hope. They had dealt a blow to the invaders, but the war was far from over. Shinzo knew the aliens would retaliate, and the battles ahead would be even harder. Yet, in the silent determination of his team, he found strength. For now, they had the advantage, and they would use it. The night stretched on, and the forest remained their ally, silent, dark, and full of unseen dangers. The Galactic generals, so confident in their technology, had underestimated the one weapon they couldn't counter, the human spirit. The air was thick with tension as the ninjas moved through the forest, their footsteps soundless against the damp earth. Above, the alien ships hung like distant shadows, ominous and watchful. The power grid's destruction had thrown the enemy into disarray, but Master Shinzo knew this was only the beginning. The aliens wouldn't stay blind for long. They would regroup, adapt, and strike back with even more force. The time for retreat had passed. Now, they had to be ready for the fight ahead. Something's wrong, Hiro muttered, his voice barely a whisper. He paused, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his blade, eyes darting through the trees. It's too quiet. Shinzo nodded. He could feel it too, a stillness in the air that didn't belong. The usual sounds of the forest had fallen away, replaced by an unnatural silence. They're hunting us, he said softly, his gaze scanning the treetops. They've adapted faster than I thought. Aiko, crouched beside them, glanced toward the distant lights of the alien base. Their scanners are still down. How could they track us this quickly? Shinzo narrowed his eyes. The enemy had underestimated them once, relying too heavily on their technology. Now, they were compensating, reverting to methods more primitive but no less dangerous. They're using something else, he said, his voice low. A different kind of tracker. Hiro's brow furrowed. You mean, they're sending actual hunters? Shinzo's silence was answer enough. The forest had shifted. Where once the enemy had relied on drones and mechanical sensors, now something more insidious prowled the underbrush. The faint sound of snapping twigs reached their ears, too rhythmic to be natural. Shinzo's grip on his blade tightened. Whatever was hunting them now wasn't bound by the same limitations as the machines. "They'll find us soon," Aiko said, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to split up, draw them away." "No." Shinzo shook his head. "Splitting up makes us vulnerable. We stay together and lead them into the terrain we control." Hiro gave a firm nod, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his nervousness. "Lead them into the cliffs? That'll slow them down." Aiko's gaze flicked to the east, where the jagged cliffs rose, steep and treacherous. It was a natural advantage, one the ninjas could use. "We'll make our stand there." Without another word they moved, disappearing into the dense foliage. The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind them, a mix of rustling leaves and guttural growls that sent chills down Hiro's spine. He kept his breathing steady, focusing on the rhythm of their movements, the way the team flowed through the forest like shadows. They reached the base of the cliffs just as the first of their pursuers came into view. A hulking alien figure stepped from the trees, its body encased in organic armor that pulsed with a faint, sickly light. Its eyes glowed, scanning the ground where the ninjas had stood moments before. Shinzo signaled for silence, his gaze fixed on the creature. It was larger than the alien soldiers they'd faced before, clearly built for hunting. Its movements were slow but deliberate, methodical as it sniffed the air, searching. Hiro's heart pounded in his chest. The creature's presence was oppressive, a looming reminder of how small they were compared to the enemy. He tightened his grip on his blade, ready to strike, but Shinzo held up a hand, stopping him. "Not yet," Shinzo whispered. "Wait for the others." As if on cue, more of the hunters emerged from the trees. They moved with unsettling precision, their eyes scanning, their senses sharp. There were 6 of them now, forming a loose perimeter as they tracked the ninja's trail. One wrong move, and the hunters would be upon them. Shinzo's mind raced. They needed to create confusion, to scatter the hunters and draw them into a disadvantage. He glanced at Aiko, and she nodded, already understanding his plan. Slowly, she reached into her pack and retrieved a small device, an explosive charge, silent but deadly. "We draw them in," Shinzo murmured. "Then we strike." Aiko crept forward, placing the charge at the base of the cliff, hidden beneath the rocks. She moved with the grace of a shadow, slipping back to their position unnoticed. The hunters continued their methodical search, edging closer, their senses sharp and hungry. "Now," Shinzo whispered. Hiro hurled a stone into the opposite direction, the sound echoing off the rocks. Instantly, the hunters shifted, their heads snapping toward the noise. It was all the distraction they needed. In a blur of motion, Shinzo, Aiko, and Hiro moved, attacking from all sides. Shinzo struck first, his blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. The nearest hunter fell, its throat severed in one clean motion. Aiko followed, her kunai finding its mark in another creature's chest. Hiro, with a burst of speed, brought down a third, his blade flashing in the moonlight. The hunters reacted swiftly, but the ninjas were faster. They weaved through the enemy ranks, their movements fluid and impossible to track. But even as they cut down their foes, more hunters appeared from the trees, converging on their position. "Fall back!" Shinzo ordered, his voice sharp. "Toward the cliffs!" They retreated toward the explosives, the hunters close on their heels. As they reached the base of the cliff, Aiko detonated the charge. The explosion rocked the ground, sending a cascade of rocks and debris tumbling down, crushing several of the pursuing hunters. But it wasn't enough. The remaining creatures pushed forward, relentless in their pursuit. Shinzo turned to face them, his eyes cold and determined. "This ends here." Hiro and Aiko stood beside him, their weapons drawn, ready for the final stand. The hunters, though fewer in number, pressed on, their growls echoing in the night. The battle was far from over, but as the ninjas prepared to face their enemies, a flicker of resolve burned in their hearts. They had drawn first blood, but now the real war was about to begin. The air crackled with the tension of an impending clash, and the faint glow of alien eyes pierced the darkness as the remaining hunters pressed forward. Shinzo stood firm at the base of the cliffs, his breath steady despite the weight of the moment. Hiro and Aiko flanked him, their blades ready, their eyes locked on the advancing enemy. There was no room for hesitation now. This was the final stand. "They're adapting," Hiro muttered under his breath, his fingers tightening around his weapon. "They're moving faster. They won't stop," Aiko replied calmly, though her gaze was sharp, calculating. "Not until one of us falls." Shinzo raised his hand, silencing them both. His mind was already at work, plotting the next move. The hunters, fewer in number now but still relentless, were learning. They were reacting quicker, their attacks more coordinated. But they were still brute force, relying on instinct and overwhelming strength. The ninjas had precision and patience. The first hunter lunged, its massive form cutting through the night air like a battering ram. Shinzo sidestepped, fluid and deliberate, letting the creature's momentum carry it past him. In the same motion, he drew his blade across its exposed flank, a flash of steel followed by a spray of alien blood. The hunter roared, but its voice was cut short as it collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Hiro and Aiko moved in unison, their attacks swift and decisive. Aiko leaped onto the back of a second hunter, driving her kunai into the base of its neck, severing its spinal cord. Hiro darted beneath the third, slashing its legs out from under it before delivering a fatal blow to its chest. Their movements were synchronized, honed by years of training, each strike designed to exploit the hunter's weaknesses. But the hunters were relentless. Even as they fell, more surged forward, their growls filling the air. The ninjas dodged and struck, each movement precise, but the pressure was mounting. The battle was no longer one of strategy alone, it was about endurance. "They're pushing us back," Hiro grunted as he parried a vicious swipe from one of the larger creatures. The force of the blow sent him stumbling, but he recovered quickly, his blade flashing as he countered with a strike to the hunter's throat. Shinzo's eyes flicked to the cliffside behind them. The terrain was becoming a disadvantage. The steep rocks left them with little room to maneuver, and the hunters were slowly boxing them in. "We can't hold this position," Aiko said, her voice steady but urgent. "We need to draw them out." Shinzo knew she was right. If they stayed pinned against the cliffs, the hunters would overwhelm them by sheer numbers. But retreat wasn't an option. Not now. Not after everything they'd fought for. He took a deep breath, centering himself. "We'll move through the narrow pass," he said, gesturing to a jagged pathway that cut through the cliffs. "It'll force them to come at us one by one. We'll hold them there." Hiro glanced at the pass, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "It's a trap for us too. If they catch us in there." "They won't," Shinzo interrupted, his voice calm but commanding. "We control the pace. We draw them in, take them down one at a time." There was no room for doubt. They moved swiftly, darting into the narrow passage, their footsteps light and silent against the rocky ground. The hunters followed, their roars echoing off the cliffs as they charged into the confined space. The walls of the pass loomed high on either side, forcing the creatures into a single file. Shinzo positioned himself at the front, Aiko and Hiro just behind him. The first hunter barreled into the pass, its massive form barely squeezing through the narrow gap. It lunged at Shinzo, its claws slashing through the air, but Shinzo was faster. He dropped low, his blade flashing upward in a clean arc, slicing through the creature's abdomen. The hunter crumpled, its body blocking the way for the others. "They're stuck," Hiro said, a hint of relief in his voice. "For now," Aiko replied. "But they'll climb over the bodies if they have to. We need to finish this quickly." Shinzo's mind raced. They had the advantage now, but it was temporary. The hunters were learning, adapting with every move. If they didn't end the fight soon, the creatures would find a way through. "We press forward," Shinzo said, his voice firm. "Keep the pressure on. Don't let them regroup." They advanced, cutting down the hunters as they tried to force their way through the narrow pass. Each strike was lethal, each movement precise. The ground was slick with alien blood, the air thick with the stench of battle. But the ninjas showed no signs of slowing. They had come too far to falter now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last hunter fell. Its body slumped to the ground with a heavy thud, its glowing eyes fading to darkness. The pass was silent once more. Shinzo wiped the blood from his blade, his breath steady but labored. Aiko and Hiro stood beside him, their weapons still drawn, their eyes scanning the cliffs for any remaining threats. But the battle was over. "They're gone," Hiro said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We did it." Aiko sheathed her blade, her expression calm but resolute. "For now." Shinzo nodded, his gaze drifting to the horizon where the alien ships still hovered like dark clouds. This victory was only a small part of the war. The aliens would regroup, send more forces, adapt to their tactics. But for now, they had won. They had shown the Galactic generals that Earth's defenders were not to be underestimated. "We rest," Shinzo said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of determination. "But the fight isn't over. It's only just begun." As the three ninjas stood together, the night sky above them glittered with distant stars, a reminder of the vastness of the battle ahead. But they were ready. The hunters had fallen, and the invaders would learn. Earth would not be so easily conquered.